So President Trump and Vice President Pence announced a new pet project of theirs. Check it out.
Now the time has come to write the next great chapter in the history of our armed forces, to prepare for the next battlefield, where America's best and bravest will be called to deter and defeat a new generation of threats to our people, to our nation. The time has come to establish the United States Space Force.
What? So when I first heard that, my thought was, well, hold on now. We already have this thing called NASA. So what do you mean Space Force? That seems duplicative. I don't get it. Well, what they're referring to is we need to have a new branch of the military that particularly functions in space. That's what they're saying. So before we've even gotten to the whole, like, hey, let's go to Mars, or hey, let's, I don't know, colonize the moon or something like that. And these are far-fetched ideas in and of themselves. But before any of that, this administration is like, oh, let's have a space force, a new branch of the military that'll be for space. So it's kicking off the new arms race, and that arms race is supposed to happen in space. I watched a whole bunch of media coverage on this. There were very few examples of anybody saying, hold on now, how much is a Space Force gonna cost? I mean, that's one of those ideas that even at face value, it sounds like, whoa, that is gonna be prohibitively expensive. Putting aside the idea that we basically live in a reality show or we live in a movie because Donald Trump is president and he's announcing our Space Force. Could have never guessed. If you said this in like the 1990s, everybody would have laughed you out of the room. But putting that aside, what happened to the budget hawks, the fiscal conservatives, the deficit scolds? This is where they're supposed to be like, oh, what do you mean? Space Force? We're going to have a new branch of the military in space, and even practical concerns aside about how possible that is and how far we've come in the technology and all that stuff. The cost, that's got to be insanely expensive. Now, the few articles that did mention cost, which wasn't many of them, one of them I think said minimum $8 billion that's already been allotted for this. And I was like, wait, hold on. We already have a Space Force bill? And no, what they were referring to is the previous defense bill that we talked about on the show. I think it was $717 billion, meaning that the Democrats gave Donald Trump over $100 billion increase in military spending. That already includes $8 billion for Space Force, which means none of the Democrats, by the way, only like 10 Democrats voted against it, but none of the Democrats were like, oh, hey, by the way, dude, you're going to have to take out this dumbass area of the bill, this provision of the bill that talks about a Space Force and allots $8 billion for it. I can't get over. So the resistance is really the Mick resistance, because they're not resisting. They're helping Donald Trump. They're assisting him. I mean, gave him over $100 billion military increase, $8 billion allotted for a Space Force. No, but we even fucking publicly debate this. Nobody, like, there was no airing this out. It was just, I love how when it's a shitty idea that they come up with, they just announce it. It's not like, oh, hey, maybe we can discuss this and we can debate this. Like, whenever we talk about free college or wiping the debt slate clean for student loan debt, Medicare for all, paid time off, there are articles about paid time off in particular states where there's deficit scolds writing endless articles about it. So whenever it's an idea for you, it's always like, well, we're going to try to bury the idea, and then if that idea, somehow gets into the mainstream of society, we're just going to endlessly debate the cost and have deficit scolds make fun of you and say you're naive and stupid for even saying that people should have health care. But when it comes to Space Force, notice no debate. No debate. It was just announced. They were, Space Force. We're doing this thing. Oh, yeah, by the way, we already started it, so we're going to do it. It's not a question. There's going to be no debate. There's going to be no discussion. Did we say we care about deficit? Sure, we just blew over $1 trillion hole in the deficit because of our urgently not needed tax cuts for the rich, where 83% of the benefits go to the top 1%. Sure, we just did that and destroyed the budget. And sure, we're unnecessarily doing a Space Force, this fucking stupid idea that like a toddler could come up with and act like, oh yes, this is prioritized over everything else. Sure, we're doing all that, but who cares? We already announced it. It already is what it is. So whenever it's spending that they want, it's just grandfathered in. No debate, no discussion, no nothing. It's just like, oh yeah, what do you mean it is what it is? The default position is we're doing it. And then somebody like you would have to talk us out of it. And of course, we're going to be already done with it and already allotted some money towards it by the time you even raise objections. So this is the system that we live in, guys. We live in, it really is like a Twilight Zone episode. We have Flint, Michigan does not have clean water right this second. And it's not just them, by the way. There are a bunch of places around the U.S. that don't have clean water. So people in America, including children, are getting poisoned by dirty water. That's happening. Our infrastructure gets a grade of D+. That's happening. Half of workers in this country make $30,000 a year or less. 30 million people don't have health insurance in this country. And in fact, anywhere from 38,000 to 45,000 people die every year because they don't have access to basic health care. So all of that is happening in this country right now. We have between 50 and 60,000 homeless veterans right now. 400,000 homeless Americans right now. That's what's happening right now. And what are we doing? Are we going to address any of those problems? Not in any substantive, serious way, because, it might be expensive. It might cost money. But Space Force, fucking Space Force, not even going to debate it, already going to allot some spending towards it. Nobody made a fucking peep, and now they just announce it. And by the way, I like how they present it as if it's like we're all supposed to be really like into it and excited by it and just like, oh, yay, Space Force. My family member's dying because they don't have health care. But Space Force, please, government, steal more of my money and use it on useless garbage. God damn it, man. Oh. Do you understand how tiring it is and how frustrating it is to read all these articles that just point out how objectively stupid we are and then to have to come out here and talk about it? It's tiring, man. I feel like 83% of my commentary is stuff I shouldn't even have to say. But I have to come out here and say it because very few people are saying it. And this is not like I'm viewed as the crazy person in mainstream circles. They look at me like, whoa, what's wrong with this guy? So is something wrong with this guy? Why is he screaming? Why is he yelling? I'm fucking screaming and yelling because they just announced a goddamn Space Force, a military branch in space. At the same time, people die because they don't have health care. That's why I'm fucking pissed. We got homeless veterans and you're creating a goddamn Space Force? Space Force. And then they're going to turn around and say, oh, well, we have to do it because of Russia and China. You started it. You started it. Now they will in kind respond and be like, all right, I guess we're having another arms race. I guess we got to go to space. But you started it. They don't care about the deficit. They don't care about spending. It is all about their moral code, their moral compass, what they prioritize, what they grandfather in. It's all in the framing, guys. They don't scream about, oh, the tax cuts for the rich are so expensive. We can't do that because they prioritize it. They prioritize it. So that's off the table. That's a given that we're going to give rich people who don't need a tax cut another tax cut. That's a given. It's a given that we're going to try to create a fucking Space Force. We already spend more than the next 9 or 10 biggest militaries in the world combined. And most of them are our allies. And we just announced a fucking Space Force like this is a shitty sci-fi movie. Oh. And by the way, the media will nowhere to be seen on this. Nowhere. You know, you would think that a media that actually gives a shit about the issues and cares and is willing to do their job, the first thing they would do is, I don't know, cite the number of people that lost health insurance in the past year under Trump. By the way, that number's 3 million. Why not cite that? Why not cite the number of jobs that were just outsourced in the past year under Trump? That number's 93,000, which is an uptick, by the way. President, I'm going to keep your jobs in the country. More jobs were outsourced under him. You would think a media that is anywhere remotely competent would do these things, but they don't. Ooh, Space Force. Shiny object. Let's talk about it. Donald Trump is president. Donald Trump is president. Donald Trump, reality show dude from the fucking 1990s with a meerkat on his head. That dude is president. He's president. And his administration just announced a Space Force. Stranger than fiction and certainly dumber than fiction.